So the next bill is House File 4300, which is the K-12 education funding bill. Welcome to the committee, Chair Dabney.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'd remind the committee that this bill is standing between them and steak.
That's right. Vice Chair Olson, would you like to move House File 4300 to be recommended for placement on the general register?
So moved, Madam Chair.
So with that, Chair Dabney, please explain your, there's an amendment to your bill?
So, Madam Chair, I do have the A6 amendment, and then I would appreciate some guidance on how you wish to handle moving the early childhood portions of Chair Pinto's bill to this bill, as I understand is the intent.
So Vice Chair Olson, would you like to offer that amendment?
Yeah, I'll move the A6 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Olson, for that. The A6 makes some technical corrections to appropriations numbers, as well as several substantive changes. It increases the percentage of the special education cross-subsidy that will be paid with by state aid from 55% to 55.895% in fiscal year 23 and 56.9405% in fiscal year 24 and later, and increases the appropriation in career and technical education aid to match the bill language, fully funding CTE-related transportation expenses. The cost of the CTE aid will now be $3.2 million a year, beginning in fiscal year 24. The bill previously overestimated the cost of its provision to buy down special education cross-subsidy, so all increased funding in this amendment still fits within the target. The A6 also replaces a provision allowing online learning providers to offer asynchronous courses, with one clarifying that independent study credit recovery programs in state-approved alternative programs may use asynchronous learning if they have done so at least the last 3 years. Madam Chair, that's the A6 amendment.
All right, are there any questions on the amendments? Seeing none, the A6 amendment is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The motion prevailed and the amendment is adopted. So, Chair Dabney, please continue with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, House File 4300 is amended, utilizes resources the state has, and uses them to meet our responsibilities as a legislature to students of today and the Minnesota of tomorrow. House File 4300 starts with paying our bills, stepping up to the responsibilities that we as a legislature have been avoiding and where we have fallen short. $422 million in helping school districts with the special education deficit that we have left them with, growing into the tails, that helps school districts cover the costs of providing mandated services where we have fallen short in the past. It goes on to eliminate the English language learner cross-subsidy by 2026, starting with an investment of $76 million in fiscal year 23 and growing into the tails. It supports student well-being and mental health by establishing a dedicated funding stream that will create 1,100 student support personnel positions across the state, school counselors, social workers, psychologists, nurses, and chemical dependency staff. With the provisions in Chair Pinto's bill, it expands access to voluntary pre-kindergarten to 23,000 more 4-year-olds through a mixed delivery model that the committee just heard and reviewed. It assists students, families, and schools coming out of 3 academic years of disrupted learning with support around enrollment for schools, after-school and summer programs for youth, and full-service community schools model to better support entire school communities. It assures families whose child attend a school with higher levels of poverty that meals will be available for their children while reducing those schools' administrative burden of providing those meals. And lastly, Madam Chair, it continues our commitment to diversifying the teacher corps and offering opportunities for education support personnel who wish to become licensed school staff, offering them pathways to those careers. Madam Chair, with that, I stand available for questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chair Dabney. So there are no other pre-filed amendments, so House File 4300 as amended is before us. Are there any questions of Chair Dabney? Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Dabney. I can't help but notice, because we all pull up the runs, you know, and can you just explain what happened here? I'm looking at the top line, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the per household total increase per pupil is $1,202, so $1,202. And I just flipped to my district, you know, because that's what we all do when we get these runs. And for example, the place that I live, Monticello, is half that, $654. So just a little bit under half. And as I look through the runs, there are some that do much worse, you know, in the 200s compared to 1,201 for Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I'm just curious, how does that happen? I mean, I know we have the worst funding, well, okay, I won't say worst. The most complicated funding formula in the entire United States is our education funding formula, and there's probably 4 people in the entire state that actually understand the craziness of our funding formula, because we use all these different categoricals, and we have our base, but we use all the, so can you just explain in layman's terms, how does this happen that Minneapolis and St. Paul get $1,201 per pupil? And, for example, my district gets about half.
Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative O'Neill, usually it's thought that there's only 3 people in the state who understand the K-12 system. You rounded up to 4.
I was hoping you would.
I'm not sure that I'm one of them, but I've got friends who are available who can help. We're paying our bills here. What we know is how much it costs to provide special education services for students in districts and across Minnesota. What we know is how much it costs to provide English language learner services to students across Minnesota. What we know is we're not paying those bills. We also know it costs a different amount in different districts based on who those students are and how they provide those services. So different districts across the state would receive different amounts of funding because we are simply reimbursing them the costs that they're incurring.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Dabney, Chair Dabney. And that would make sense to me, except for the fact that I have Monticello. So Monticello actually, as you know, as we've tried to work through their chaos of an error that happened at MDE, and then they tried to claw it back, and they never did get that money back. But through that process, you and I both know that Monticello is a co-op. They for special ed, so they have more than the average school district of special ed kids because they literally are a co-op and they bring them in. And that would make sense to me, except for Monticello's number is $658, which is only $4 more than my Maple Lake school. So I still don't understand how, with your explanation in that case, that the numbers still don't work for me, because even Monticello, who are literally the co-op for special education in my area, are still a little bit more than half of the Minneapolis and St. Paul School District.
Chair Dabney.
Madam Chair, I may ask Mr. Strom, who's available online, to talk through the modeling and the reimbursement, and he may be able to shed some light here for Representative O'Neill and the committee.
Mr. Strom, please introduce yourself and proceed in response to Representative O'Neill's question.
Madam Chair, Representative Daphne and O'Neill, Tim Strom from House Research. The question of special education funding and where the cross-subsidy comes from a couple of different places. One of those places, as Representative O'Neill mentioned, is the billbacks that go from the co-ops and from the joint service organizations, such as what happens in Monticello, to the resident districts. And another big portion of that comes from the intermediate school districts and charter schools that bill their special education costs back to the resident districts as well. So one piece of data that significantly affects Minneapolis and St. Paul much more than all of the rest of the districts in the state is the amount of charter school bill back for special education costs. And when we look at this number, it's referred to as the tuition billing number, and I'd be happy to share with the committee a file that breaks out each of these categories. But you'll see that because of the number of students in Minneapolis and St. Paul who are resident to those districts that attend charter schools, that the tuition billing to those districts, which is in the unreimbursed costs, is quite a bit higher. So that's the primary difference between why some school districts have very high special education costs and relatively modest special education costs. There are issues related to workforce. The formula is a reimbursement formula, and so the level of services and the salary of the providers of those services matter. But in general, when one looks at special education data, the biggest difference in terms of unreimbursed costs is the amount of tuition that's billed back to the residents.
Madam Chair,
Chair Dabney.
may I ask Mr. Strom a clarifying question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Strom, I'm looking at Representative O'Neill's Monticello district because that has been one that she referenced some issues a few years ago. I continue to hear from time to time from parents in that district and staff about their challenges around special education funding. But Mr. Strom, am I to understand that because they operate as a co-op and are taking in students from surrounding districts and providing them those services, the Monticello Public Schools are able to bill back to the resident districts of those students the cost of providing those services?
Mr. Strom.
Madam Chair, members, I think the Monticello situation is a little further complicated. The method that was used was the school districts formerly were in a type of cooperative arrangement where the Monticello School District was the fiscal host. And they switched to a different organizational structure, largely at the suggestion of the Department of Education that the fiscal host model wouldn't work as well as some other models. The year of the shift made all of the difference. It was the year of transition in 2016 of the special education formula. And the result was the base that got set for the groups of districts, including the Monticello School District, was quite a bit lower for the starting place. And so there was a big one-time funding gap that continues each year because of that lower base that was established. In answer to your question then, Representative Davney, the special education services that are provided through the new cooperative structure are billed back to the resident school districts. I'll see if I can find some details in the next few minutes that I can share with you and Representative O'Neill about the reasons why Monticello's gap may appear more average than not. But I think a large part of their problem was really related to this one-time problematic choice of the start year for them for purposes of the regular special education fund.
So, Madam Chair,
Daphne.
I think in English, the simpler understanding is the students that Monticello takes in from other districts and provides services, the cost of those services is covered by a combination of state aid and resident district tuition payments. And so the special ed deficit that we are attempting to take on aggressively for Monticello and every other district in the state that Representative O'Neill sees here is the deficit based on the state's lack of sufficient funding for special education services for Monticello resident students. How'd I do, Representative O'Neill?
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Dabney. Yeah, you're close. I mean, Monticello is a unique situation, and I recognize that. And I would have loved to thought that it was their choice, but it wasn't their choice to switch their model. And you know that there was this whole craziness of a back-end multiplier that fell off, and it's a very complicated funding issue, and yet has not been resolved. You and I worked hard. We got it all the way to the governor's desk, and the governor vetoed it. It's a whole long story. In any case, my greater concern is really just the fact that there's a lot of haves and have-nots in your runs here. And that was just an example, that there's quite a bit of funding headed to Minneapolis and St. Paul, and much less or so to some of the other school districts. And, I understand that they've got needs and all of that. So let me ask it a slightly different way about the money on the base. How much did you put on the base formula so that everyone gets the same base amount?
Chair
So,
Dabney.
thank you, Madam Chair. So Representative Neal, we treat all districts equally in this approach. All districts receive 55 point something % decrease in their special education deficit. So we took an equality approach to this, to every district across the state. Right now, we are in and have been in a situation where districts across the state are taking on water. There's a hole in the boat. And we can certainly put more fuel in the tank, but if we don't, members, patch that hole in the boat's not going to get very far. And dealing with the funding deficits in special education and English language learning is that we've created, the holes we bored in the bottom of those boats, is our first responsibility. And that's the approach we've chosen to take.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I appreciate that. And I realize that, you know, even in my school districts, in my district, there are varying amounts of the cross-subsidy. And some districts have really huge cross-subsidies and some have slightly less than the very huge cross-subsidy issues. I totally get that. I understand that. It's just a little bit concerning if we're going to spend 1.1 or so billion in this biennium and over 2 billion in the next biennium, that at least in the runs, it's just such a wide gap, right? And I get it if all you're trying to do is cross-subsidy, but I think there's a little bit more going on in your bill than just cross-subsidy, because the cross-subsidy number is, you know, less than half of what we're doing this biennium, right? And so there's a lot more going on here. And I just wanted to point out that when you add it all together and you add all these crazy categoricals and you run the formula, that there are haves and have-nots in the runs. And I just wanted to point out that a couple of my schools are in the have-nots, and they're just about half of what Minneapolis-St. Paul is getting. So I appreciate the conversation, and I know you and I have talked about these things in the past, and we've tried to help specific situations like Monticello, and unfortunately we did not prevail, even though we gave it a really good go for 2 bienniums, and we still couldn't get their money. So they are in a world of hurt, which is why you keep hearing from them. And honestly, their administration just flat gave up, because we had tried for 4 years to try to get money for them, and they finally just said, look, we just don't have the bandwidth to keep doing this. So I'm sure they're not completely unique in that, but in that sense where they were forced to change their structure, they are. So I appreciate that. You know, maybe someday we'll see a little surprise and a budget that actually makes them whole. That'd be nice, but I don't see it today. Thank you, Chair Dabney.
Okay. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Dabney, I'm looking at the $422.6 million for the special ed cross subsidy reduction. I get that. Could you point to us in the bill where there's any special ed reform
Chair Dabney.
that is called on by school districts every single year?
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, one place where we do provide reform is we provide dedicated funding for special education teachers to have more time to provide students the due process paperwork and families the due process paperwork that's required under state and federal law, so that we can be sure that their focus can be more on the teaching, because they've been granted more time outside of the school day to do the necessary paperwork. As you know, the issue around special education is a lot around paperwork. That has continued to be an ongoing conversation. Finding consensus with everyone on that is often challenging, and was not a focus of the Finance Committee this year. I don't know, since I don't serve on the Education Policy Committee, what conversations there were there.
Madam Chair.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do sit on education policy, and not a lot of time was dedicated towards addressing the actual paperwork issue. So I understand you wanting to give the teachers more time to complete the paperwork, but that issue could be solved by by doing something about the paperwork challenges that these teachers have, and there's nothing in this bill that addresses that. Another question, or maybe just a statement, but, you know, the amount of money in this bill, when we had, last year was a budget year. Now we're adding more money, and I understand you guys have your targets, and the Democrats in the House are spending pretty much all of the surplus over the next few years because the spending goes into the tails. But, you know, it seems to me that this is almost, the money in this bill is almost a buy-off for the over 50 mandates that are in this bill. 50 mandates. And we know every time the school districts come to us, and we all get this from our own school districts, please no more mandates. Please no more mandates. And instead of eliminating mandates, this bill adds 50 mandates. And we're going to, it's so frustrating that nothing is being done about that. But we're piling on the mandates, and then, oh, since we piled on the mandates, we're going to give you this money to I don't know what the motive there is, to keep them satisfied or quiet or whatever. But this is a backward approach to what our educational system needs right now. And Representative Dabney, one final question. Could you address in this bill, you know, over the last few years we've had, these kids have had a lot of lost learning. So where in this bill, I mean, to me, this bill, if you're going to spend more money, this bill should be full of policy that gets these kids caught up. So could you point to me in the bill the areas where you're addressing these years of lost learning?
Chair Dabney.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, I'd also remind you that we have the Special Ed Tuition Billing Working Group in the bill, which is another area of reform in special education that's been long an area of challenge. Madam Chair and members, I'd remind you the delayed learning that some students and many students have experienced can be best dealt with dealing with the special education cross-subsidy deficit, the English language learner cross-subsidy deficit, with declining enrollment support for schools, providing schools with stable, secure funding so that they can then work on addressing the needs of students. Some of that delayed learning has been complicated further by challenges to student well-being and mental health. We provide dedicated funding for 1,100 student support personnel across the state to better support students. We also provide funding to help identify education support personnel, classroom aides and such like, who might want to move into those student support licensed positions to help them get that training and that education and be able to take their places in those schools. So the best thing we can do to help schools deal with delayed learning is to put students at the center of our deliberations, which is what my committee has done and what this bill has expressed.
Madam Chair.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are there some metrics that we should know about that prove out that these things that you just spoke of will actually produce results?
Sure. Madam Chair, Representative Scott, as you know, we use the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, the MCAs, as our primary metric for educational achievement.
But those are optional, Mr. Chair.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, under federal law, 95% of the students are expected to participate in those tests.
Expected to. Right. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just very frustrated with this bill, and you know, while you say it puts students at the center, I disagree with that. Yeah, I'll be voting no. That's not a surprise. But thank you for the line of question.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this forward. I'm sure that all districts are appreciative of getting more funding this year as well. And I heard you say at the very beginning that we are paying our bills. And I would disagree slightly in the fact that, in my opinion, no, we're paying the school district's bills. The school districts that have that have taken great pains to be very efficient in how they use those funding, so forth, and others. You know, the way I read the Constitution of Minnesota, it says that the legislature is responsible for the funding mechanisms for the school systems, and the school systems is responsible for the curriculum and educating of the kids within those funding mechanisms. And what we've done over the years is continued the micromanagement of school systems with interventions of mandates and requirements that the legislature has put upon them, and at the same time restricting them through very complicated funding mechanisms to do that. And so I don't really see us paying our bills, and instead those that have been more efficient in the use of funding so that their cross subsidies are less than other districts per pupil are actually getting a deficit. And those that have been unwilling to make some of those decisions are being rewarded with additional dollars in here. And so I have some concern about that, and just about the fact that we continue to put on more mandates, requirements on schools without taking into effect all of those mandates require additional administration, paperwork, et cetera. It all becomes a net negative as well. Now, I did hear you talk about the boat with the hole in it, and we've got water coming in, and how this bill plugs that hole. Well, in my opinion, what this bill does is actually just increases the pumping, the pumps to keep the water out of the ship. We really haven't plugged any holes, because the hole really is the overwhelming mandates that schools have to deal with. And if we really wanted to deal with that hole of siphoning off funding, we ought to deal with those mandates. And so I'm hoping that we're not going to change the bill today. It's going to go through the way that you wish it to, but I hope into the future that we have some thought about how we reduce the mandates and allow the school systems and school districts to actually deal with providing the curriculum within the funding that we give them, rather than us always stepping in. So that's kind of just my 2 cents worth, and I appreciate the work that you've done on this, but I think we have to deal with the mandates, we have to deal with all the other things, giving them the opportunity, giving our school districts the opportunity to actually educate our kids that's best for them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is Mr. Strom still on?
Mr. Strom, are you present?
Madam Chair, I am still here.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Strom, it's good to see you again. Just a couple of questions from the spreadsheet. First of all, I guess we learn something every day, but line 95 of the spreadsheet shows special education 90-10 shift. It seems to imply that when we paid off the shift, we did not pay off we previously paid off the shift. We did not pay off the special education shift. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Mr. Strom.
Madam Chair.
Perhaps Ms. Beckel could address this
Ms.
question.
Beckel.
Yes, Madam Chair and members, Solveig Beckel, House Fiscal. Line 95 of the spreadsheet shows the special education 90-10 shift. This item shows the cost in fiscal year 23 only of shifting special education funding from 87.66% funding in the year of the entitlement, and then the cleanup payment of 12.34% in the following year, to the 90-10 shift that we see in more of the education funding formulas, in more of the education funding appropriations.
Madam Chair and Ms. Beckel, so I'm just curious, and I apologize for old habits die hard, so I, of course, run to Mr. Strom when I don't know something. So Ms. Beckel, on line 95 there, so why was that not already 90-10?
Mrs. Beckel.
Madam Chair, Representative, So I believe at some point in the past, this was shifted because there were not funds to pay for the full 90% in a given year. But as I have just started on this policy area, I cannot speak to the history of that. So perhaps you would indeed be better served by Mr. Strom in this instance.
It's okay. Madam Chair, Ms. Beckel, thank you. And because usually in law, we automatically pay this stuff back. Like it automatically goes back to 90-10. So and Mr. Strom or Ms. Beckel, I can speak with you offline. I was surprised to see that. For either Mr. Strom or Ms. Beckel, on line 4, we have declining enrollment aid of $25 million. Already in state statute, we, I guess I call them phantom students. We already compensate districts for declining enrollment. We give them money for students they no longer have. How is this $25 million allocated in terms of that declining enrollment? I know we have I think it's 77% for the existing law. How is this $25 million allocated to school districts then?
Let's try Ms. Beckel.
Madam Chair, Representative, if I can pass this one off to Mr. Strom, I'd appreciate that.
Mr. Strom.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, in the one-time declining pupil aid that's in the bill, it's calculated on the fall enrollment numbers, the number of students enrolled on October 1st, essentially, of each site aggregated to the district level. It would include the enrollment in programs like intermediate programs, and it compares the fall 21 enrollment number to the fall 20 enrollment number. The total loss for any district is then proportionately allocated to reach the $25 million. So the districts with the largest percentage decline between the fall of 21 and the fall of 20 will receive the proportionate amount of that $25 million. It's a one-time aid paid 100% in fiscal 23. The regular formula, as you mentioned, the regular declining aid formula that's in general education pays 28% of the formula allowance for each student who's not there in the following year using the measure of adjusted pupil units.
Representative Garofalo.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And then to either of our nonpartisan research, it looks like there's some levy increases, but it looks like they're all bought down by the operating capital equalization. Is that right?
Mr. Strom?
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then the base special education increase, it used to be that every year we would increase the special education formula automatically by, I believe, 4.9%. Is that still the case for forecast into the future?
Mr. Strom?
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, the 4.6% annual increase in the base is being phased down. Changes about 3 or 4 years ago began to phase that down so that districts' relative share of their total special education costs would become more even amongst districts. When the change was made to the formula that put the 4.6% in place, there were very different starting places for the district. And so the adjustment, the 4.6% adjustment is still in statute, but it reduces by a little bit each year. So it's becoming a smaller number over time until it reaches a 2% adjustment.
Okay. And then, Madam Chair, my final question with regards to that. So with the Dabney bill where the special education cross subsidy is being eliminated, is that 4.6% increase still going to apply to it regardless of the expenses, or will it be capped at the current limit that we set in law?
Mr. Strom?
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, the 4.6% adjustment happens first, and then the cross subsidy gets determined. So the more growth there is on the front end of the formula, the less of the cross subsidy there would be. Alternatively, if there's less growth on the front end of the formula, there'd be slightly more in the cross subsidy as well. So the cross subsidy formula comes into play at the very end after all the other calculations of the special education formula are made. Then the cross subsidy says of the remaining amount that's not funded, a percentage is funded. And that's the primary line that Representative Dabney's House File 4300 adjusts by pushing that number from 6.43% up to slightly above 55%.
Representative Ruffalo.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Beckel and Mr. Strom. Thank you for answering those questions. Representative Dabney, I want to wish you happy trails as you retire into your post-legislative activity. I'll save most of my comments for this for the House floor, but I do want to thank you for your work over the last 22 years in the legislature. So, I mean, when you first got elected, you had hair.
It's true.
But Madam Chair, and,
No, it's not.
Representative Dabney, so I'll be voting no on your bill today. I do think it's important as we're talking about this to look at the specific dollar amounts. For this fiscal year, this bill contains a $1.15 billion increase in spending. In the tails, it's $2.1 billion. Even by the standards we use today, that is an exceptional amount of money. And so I'll be voting no, but Representative Dabney, once again, I want to say, well, thank you for your friendship, and I wish you happy trails in your post-legislative activity.
All right. Representative Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Dabney, for your work in the bill, and I've enjoyed working with you the last 4 years, and I'll just get out of the way. I do wish you well as you go on beyond this. So I know, as many of us that sit in the education and all the committees, I know a lot of the conversations and policies that we see come from a place of trying to solve things that are out there, injustices, ills, and frankly, just bad policies. So I respect that. I respect that. So a couple of questions that I have on the bill. The board member section, just walk me through why we're putting that in. Lines 4.15, and we can go to staff too. It's just an understanding. We switched that employment relationship from 8,000 to 20,000. Why are we doing that again?
Chair Dabney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Creasy. And first, thank you. I've appreciated and enjoyed our partnership the last 4 years as well. So thank you for your kind words. That provision came forward from, if I understand it correctly, the School Boards Association, who were recognizing that some school board members also work part-time in their districts, and that there's a value to that. You know, you get to see it from the inside and the outside, from the top and the bottom, but that that $8,000 salary limit was artificially low.
Representative Creasy.
Very good. Thank you. And I believe that was to the point of, again, trying to encourage good people to serve on school boards, see the multiple perspectives. And I mean, we want this to be an engaging, the school board position to be an engaging position that's helpful. A couple of other questions. Is Mr. Uni still on from MDE?
Chair Dabney.
Madam Chair, Representative Creasy, I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Uni, under the ethnic studies piece, it came from the House File 3434 Fraser bill. To this point, is MDE already working on any of these curriculums or these studies? Is any of that going to be available soon?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Representative Creasy, what I can tell you in terms of, the department is not authorized under law to create curriculum. We do have the statutory mandate to review and revise our academic standards on a 10-year cycle, and that includes a range of subjects, including one of the ones we just went through, which was social studies standards, and we're in the math standards right now. But to your question specifically around, are we implementing or creating curriculum, and particularly to ethnic studies, we are not in charge of creating curriculum.
Representative Creasy.
Madam Chair, and so Mr. Rooney, so just so I'm clear, so in this this part of the bill, we create mandates around that, and we're not the FBI, the CIA, so I'm hoping that this isn't under some secret place where we're doing these clandestine curriculum best practices studies. My question is this, I'll just get right to it. Is MDE working on anything of a framework that could quickly be implemented if this bill was passed to get out to schools?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Representative Krisha, I'm just trying to look at the exact language in the bill to just kind of see what the timelines are. But what I can tell you is that we are overseeing the process for reviewing and revising the academic standards. In terms of curriculum, that would be up to the school districts and charter schools to be able to access the curriculum with their resources that they feel best fits their communities within the strictures of whatever would ultimately be passed under this bill and what is required to meet the academic standards that are passed under the review and revision process that we engage in under statute. In terms of the timelines of when things are, I'll have to look at the exact lines to see what the timelines are there. But again, we are in charge of doing academic standards and not in charge of creating curriculum.
Representative Krisha.
So, Mr. Ernie, I know that MDE has been trying to hire an ethnic studies specialist. Has that position been filled yet?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Representative Krisha, I believe we are still in the process of hiring. I believe it's been posted and we are looking at candidates. I will have to provide an update to the committee soon. I believe Assistant Commissioner Bobby Burnham had to step away to another meeting, and I can check with her and try to get that information to you.
Thank you.
Representative Friesen.
And Mr. Ernie, I'm not trying to be evasive, but it seems to me, in the interest of being fully transparent, that MDE is looking for a position. That position would create guidelines or curriculum to adopt academic standards for ethnic studies in a bill that we don't even know has been passed yet, or if this would survive through the process of conference committees and all that. So what concerns me is that we may have a scenario where MDE has already created some of this and would be asking for expedited rulemaking to push something that has already been vetted or created by a specialist. Are you telling me that scenario doesn't exist in the job description for this position, where they're not going to be creating that type of curriculum that could be very easily, if this were to pass, go into school district as that mandated curriculum?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Representative Krisha, I want to be absolutely clear.
Yep.
For the committee that the department is not authorized to create curriculum or promote any particular curriculum. We do, in certain circumstances and certain subjects, provide resources and access on our website or to other organizations that provide access to curriculum as a resource that is available. We don't promote or push any particular curriculum. We're not or create curriculum. We're not allowed to do that under statute. For the academic specialist who has the responsibilities of helping implement ethnic studies, their responsibility, we had funds that were provided to us in our operating allocation under last year's bill that we put forward for hiring an ethics studies specialist who will be in charge of helping implement the academic standards. So some of their job responsibilities would include being able to provide guidance and implementation assistance for districts and charters around how to best meet the state academic standards. They would be able to respond to a district's response, and that would include webinars, and that would include trainings and those types of things. And they would be able to respond to district's questions of, hey, does this type of general curriculum meet the academic standards? But they wouldn't specifically be promoting any particular curriculum. They would really be providing technical assistance around implementation. And to your point around would this job position be covering work that isn't already part of, well, I would say that under our last academic standards revision cycle, there were several standards and benchmarks that were put into place around, at least at this point, we're in the SONAR process in front of the administrative law, or in the SONAR process that will go in front of the administrative law judge soon. But in our current academic standards that are under review, we do have some ethnic studies components. And so those will come within the responsibility of that ethnic study or of that ethnic studies specialist when they come on board and start that work.
So, remember, I just want to quickly say these are like absolutely fantastic questions and information and learning that we're having here. We have about 10, 11 minutes left, and if we do not finish before 10:45, we will come back this afternoon. Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So No problem.
No pressure.
So just quickly then, thank you for that, Mr. Uni. And so what I'm hearing is, and the concerning part of this is, let's take the human side of this. The Department of Education, like any other organization, is anticipating and looking at how it's going to meet the needs of what it's being asked for. Statutorily, they're not being asked to do this, but they are creating the standards that they're not statutorily being asked to create for those standards. My question quickly would be, Mr. Uni, if this bill were to pass, would that give the Department of Education, in your estimation, the statutory authority to go ahead and put out the curriculum that isn't created but kind of is created?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, committee members, again, I'll just be clear.
And by the way, I like Mr. Uni, just so we're clear.
It is true. We are friends who push each other. Madam Chair, committee members, Representative Krisha, again, I just have to be clear. The department is not promoting a particular curriculum. In terms of the standards, if the component of this bill that the department put out, which is embedding ethnic studies across our academic standards, as well as making it part of the knowledge and skills portion of our statutes, which comes under compulsory instruction, yes, we would view that as the ability of this ethnic studies specialist to be able to assist districts in meeting the academic standards, which require all of them to have ethnic studies as a component of them. There are provisions in this bill that the department did not put forward that do come from, you correctly identified, Representative Fraser's bill that include ethnic studies task force, as well as a range of activities that the department would have to engage in to do further implementation of the academic standards. But, pardon me, I will be clear, it wouldn't give us any free rein to implement any type of particular curriculum. We've been clear, I think, with the advocates and Representative Fraser and others that the department is not allowed to implement curriculum. So we would not interpret anything that passed in here as the department promoting a particular curriculum.
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple quick ones, just for my understanding, Chair Dabney. We bring forth in this bill the mandate for menstrual products provided, and also we have where school districts cannot, they may not discriminate for ceremonial dress for graduation, which I think are fine provisions. I'm just curious, why did they raise to this level? Has this happened a lot? Do we have a big problem with students not being able to get feminine hygiene products? And do we have schools that have told students they can't wear a ceremonial into the graduation ceremonies? I just don't know. I'm just asking.
Chair Daphne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Krisha, the funding for menstrual products is really an expression of some remarkable leadership from young women, high school women who have taken up that issue. It's really part of a national trend. Elsewhere, you'll see the same thing. But they have done remarkable work in bringing that issue forward. It's got bipartisan and bicameral support, and I'm proud to carry that provision. As they point out, we provide soap and toilet paper and hand towels in the bathrooms, and we can provide menstrual products as well. To the ceremonial regalia for Native American students, yes. We have school districts that have prohibited Native children from wearing ceremonial regalia at their high school graduation ceremonies, which is obviously a very meaningful, hopefully a very meaningful event in a young student's life.
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate that, and that's wrong, and that shouldn't have happened. Just a couple of other quick things, just so I keep us respectful of time. But there's no formula increase. And Mr. Strom, if you're still available, I'm just curious, we could have done a formula increase which would have allowed dollars to flow into general fund, and school districts could have then applied that to the special ed cross subsidy. Is that correct?
Mr. Strom.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Strom?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the choice is the legislature's on which funding formulas to put money on. The rule of thumb that is often used in the K-12 world is that each dollar on the formula allowance costs roughly $1 million. So if you were to take the amount spent on the special education reimbursement or any other line on the spreadsheet, if you were to take $1 million, you could raise the formula allowance by $1. So if you were to take $100 million from a different place and put that on the formula allowance, you could raise the formula allowance by $100.
Representative Christian.
And thank you, Mr. Strom, I have you, but just so I get the affirmation, and that dollar, school districts could have applied that to the cross-subsidy shortfall as well, without actually having us to target it this way. Is that correct?
Mr. Strom.
Madam Chair, Representative Krisha, yes, the school districts currently pay for their cross-subsidy for special education out of their regular operating funds. Whatever their shortages in special education comes out of the rest of their budget. And in the same manner, if there were additional general education money for from the formula, that money would be available to help cover the special education shortfall.
Representative Krisha.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Strom. And before, I don't have any further questions for you, Mr. Strom. I'll just, again, thank you, Ms. Ahrens and all the other staff. I don't remember all the names as well, but as we all know, staff is absolutely fantastic, and it makes us way more articulate as legislators than we appear to be just because we stay at hotels. So one of the things, my closing remarks on this is I come up, Chair Dabney, and members, what we have is a philosophical difference. Every problem we have in here is tied back to conversations that have come up, doesn't matter who's in charge. And one quick note I'll say is it's absolutely appalling to me that the federal government can't fix the special ed gap that they've created when we quickly got money through COVID. And for years we've been talking about this. And this is a problem that was solvable, but the fortitude and courage from our federal government hasn't been there on this, which is appalling, because we're talking about our greatest future resource of kids. But we're left with this scenario, and the scenario that we have is a philosophical difference, where I believe we're looking at we're skirting the line of trying to be a state school board versus a diverse school boards around the state. This bill gets us in the direction of creating more of a state school board model, where we drive mandates and we come down with the 50 mandates. We've got over 800 musts in this bill, and those all give us the indication that this bill is acting like how do we create a state school board situation that drives it down to the schools. And if we're gonna do that, then maybe we should just take our local school boards and local control away completely, because we're headed that way. We can't have both. I contend that in the areas that I represent and the conversations I have out in rural Minnesota, that more diversity is better. That, I mean, we're doing the school board language here because we do value our school boards. We do value the people that are closest to the students, who can make those decisions and have those conversations with the students and work with superintendents. That there's value in that. But we are now taking that decision making and we're moving it to a state level. And instead of actually solving the mandate or actually solving the special ed program and the fallacies that come of there and all the things that happen, we just add more time and add more money. We give teachers more time to work on a problem and a load that's getting higher rather than reducing their load. And I think that that puts the chair in the untenable position of creating a bill that has everything to everybody, but doesn't really get us on the path of improvement for many of these areas. I think that when we look at this, it reminds me of an Apple video that many of us may have seen. I think it was in the late 80s, where there was a person up on the screen and somebody comes running in from the back and they smash the screen. And it was in 1984. Boy, we're old. But this bill, it worries me, because we as a legislature are heading down to a path where we're trying to make everything fit into one box. And that's not what's designed to work the best for our schools. It's not what's designed to solve the cultural and community differences across the state. So Chair Dabney, I understand where your approach comes from. I think there's a philosophical difference. I think that what the school districts I've talked to feel like they're being bribed to take a $500 less per pupil on this with no formula increase just to take the mandates that are going to come. And I know where those mandates have all come from. They've come from a fear that we're going to do something or something's going to happen in the past. I mean, we elevate menstrual products over meals for kids that didn't make it into this bill. And so while I see all of these things, I see the incongruencies of what we created and the scenario where a one-size-fits-all school board type of approach at the state level is becoming more appealing in this bill than if we were to push that to local decision-making for our schools. I'll be voting no.
Seeing no further discussion, Chair Dabney, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief given the time. I first want to thank the staff, both partisan and nonpartisan. Every kind thing that Representative Crecia just said about staff and their role is true, and I emphasize that as well. It was excellent to be able to phone some friends here, and I really like having the little screen right here where I can track from this position. And you're right, Madam Chair, the questions and the discussion were absolutely fantastic, and I appreciate it. There's a lot that I could respond to, but I will say this. I think the philosophical difference is whether we take on the responsibility that we've taken on or not. We have mandated certain services. Every child in Minnesota should have the opportunity for world-class education. We should not look at reducing services for some kids because they're more expensive or more inconvenient to educate. We mandate those services because they're the right thing to do, because they create opportunity, and they create an opportunity for Minnesota. It's our responsibility to pay the bills. The philosophical divide here is whether we should stand up to our responsibility or not. Madam Chair, members, thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the questions. I ask for your support on House File 4300 as amended.
Well, thank you, Chair Dabney. The last 2 years have been a real challenge for everyone from this associated with our educational system, from our children to our parents to our educator. We are in a historical moment in time where we have underfunded education. We have some of the worst disparities in the country right here in our educational system. And so this is our moment where, as we have a surplus, to do the real investment, to make sure, as you stated, Chair Dabney, that every child has the opportunity to succeed and be successful in school and thus in life. So I just want to thank you for your work and the committee work that you've done this session to really step up to the plate to make sure that we're taking this time when we can. Over the last 2 years, it has been so tough for so many to create a pathway that's going to be fair and equitable for our children within the educational system. And I think this bill will address some of those really critical needs that we need to be addressing today. So there being no further discussion, we will proceed to the motion to combine these two bills and send them to the floor using House File 4300 as the vehicle. Vice Chair Olson, would you like to move that language contained in House File 4300 as amended to be incorporated into the Education Omnibus as separate articles?
So moved, Madam Chair.
So the Ocean motion is before us. To be clear, this is just one of the motions to include the education bill as separate articles into the Omnibus Education Bill. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
No.
The motion prevails. Chair Pinto, your bill spans two different areas. For today, would you like to move that Article 5 and 6 contained in House File 4735 as amended be incorporated into the Education Omnibus as separate articles?
So moved, Madam Chair.
So the Pinto motion is before us. This vote is to incorporate just Article 5 and 6 from House File 4735 into the Omnibus Education Bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
No.
The motion prevails. So members, we now have the House File 4300 as amended before us. The next vote would be the final vote on the combined package. Vice Chair Olson renews her original motion that House File 4300 as amended be recommended for placement on the general register, and that nonpartisan staff be directed to make any technical corrections and amend the title. This would be a roll call vote. Ms. Anna, please take the roll.
Chair Moran?
Aye.
Chair Moran, aye. Vice Chair Olson?
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Garofalo?
Garofalo, no.
Garofalo, no. Representative Albright?
No.
Albright, no. Representative Becker-Finn?
Aye.
Becker-Finn, aye. Representative Bernardi?
Aye.
Bernardi, aye. Representative Eklund?
Aye.
Eklund, aye. Representative Hansen?
Aye.
Hansen, aye. Representative Hassan?
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Representative Hertas?
Hertas, no.
Hertas, no. Representative Hornstein?
Aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Johnson?
No.
Johnson, no. Representative Kresha?
Kresha, no.
Kresha, no. Representative Liebling?
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly?
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mariani?
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Representative Marcourt?
Aye.
Marcourt, aye. Representative Miller?
No.
Miller, no. Representative Nash? Oh, Nash, excuse me. Representative Nelson?
Aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Noor?
Nor I.
Noor, aye. Representative O'Neill?
No.
O'Neill, no. Representative Pulowski?
Pulowski, aye.
Pulowski, aye. Representative Petersburg?
No.
Petersburg, no. Representative Pinto?
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Schumacher?
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Schultz?
Schultz, aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Scott?
No.
Scott, no. And Representative Sundin?
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. Madam Chair, that is 18 ayes and 10 nays.
There have been 18 ayes and 10 nays. The motion prevails. House File 4300 as amended is recommended for placement on the general register, and nonpartisan staff are directed to make any and all technical corrections and amend the title. I want to say thanks to all the chairs and your committee for putting together this important work.